Hello, welcome to Otherworldly, the Changing Times, Changing World show. Today is March 27th, and today I'm very excited because I've got Gretchen Schork back. And she is going to be talking about numbers, something that she knows better than lots of other people, because she's put the time into it. um, but this is going to be a different perspective than the simple numerology that you're going to find in any little introduction to divination book. And the cool thing is it has to do with say hi, Gretchen.
Hi.
and and we'll let you take off as it
Alrighty.
were.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and
It was not as good as I'd meant. I can't.
it's good
I lost
enough.
my notes. I lost my notes.
What we're going to be looking at is not only numbers, but also planets, and putting the two together and putting alphabet symbols with the whole kit and caboodle and stirring them up and making a mess in the cauldron. So a long time ago, I got a bug in my bonnet about not wanting to do gematria, which is using the numeric value of the Hebrew letters. And I did not particularly want to have to learn Greek for isopsepia. I always get the word wrong. I apologize to anybody that does know it. So those two alphabets I left behind in the dust because they didn't suit my needs. And I looked around, and I have worked with the runes very intensively, but they also don't do the full job that I would like them to do. So what I ended up with is the one alphabet that I really do know and that I have known for quite some time, come to think of it, like 3/4 of a century. Well, maybe 70 years, which is the American alphabet. And I specify American as opposed to English because we've had a few changes in American English that are not native to the England English or the Australian English. And American English is what this woman works with. I have assigned the letters of the alphabet to the various different meanings that we use in magic. And in that process, I have come up with, hell's bells. It's not going to work. Well, whatever. I have come up with an association between the letters of the alphabet. I don't know if you can see that. The letters of the alphabet combined with the planetary forces and the zodiacal forces and why is my lamp not working? This is the reason we have secondary lamps. So every letter is associated with an element, a zodiac sign, or a planet. That's a different lecture, but that is part of the overall structure of what's going to be used today. To do numeration, and I call it numeration, you can call it anything you want, really. There's no particular term for the American alphabet using numbers, so I made it up. Numeration seems to work. Okay, so having said that, then I need to say that we cannot say that A is equal to 1 or B is equal to 2, which is what it would be in any other system. Rather, the numbers change depending on what planet you're working with. Okay, now I'm going to introduce this concept very quickly and then move on and come back to it again later. So if you have a word, let's take the word health. That's always a good thing to talk about. And health is going to be part of a magical operation that you're doing, and you want it to be in a Saturnian kind of environment that you're going to be using the word health. So in order to get the numbers, you need a grid that will tell you what the value of the numbers are. So get out of the way here. If you make a grid with 3 columns, that gives you values for all the letters. All the letters in column 1 are 1. All of them in the second column are valued at 2, and all the letters in column 3 are valued at 3. If I were to do it instead in Jupiter, I would have 4 columns. It's a little bit shorter than 3, but it looks a little bit different. Now, if you take the letter H in Saturn, it has a value of 2. And in Jupiter, H has the value of 4. Just so you know, you take the planetary grids so that you can have a different numeric value for the word health when you spell it out in any planet. Okay, now you have an association between your word and the planetary force that you're using in your ritual. So that's a general concept that is a basic of what we're going to be talking about today. If you take those same grids, you can do sigils. This is the Golden Dawn form, and it has the Hebrew letters on it, and you trace out the spelling of your word on that disc. The elements at the center, the planets in the second circle, and then the zodiac around the outside. The same thing can be done with the pad on a telephone. That gives you a sigil for the individual who owns that phone number. Very personalized. It only goes to one person on the planet.
Or everybody in that house.
With the old landlines, yes, but now that we carry our own cell phones, it has a tendency not to be a household anymore. It tends to be a personal thing. But you can trace out the phone number on here, and that is particular to a particular phone that you're trying to reach. In the same way, we can use the grid for the alphabet, depending on what planet we're working with. This is a moon chart because it has 9 columns, and 9 is the number associated with the moon. Okay. And on that grid, you can trace out a word. In this case, it spells out magic. So if you're doing lunar magic, you trace out the word on the grid, and now you have a sigil to support your magic. It's a very simple, straightforward technique. It's a basic technique that has been used with ceremonial magic and with other forms of magic in the Western tradition. It is usually on the grid of 9 because 1 through 9 makes sense to people. 1 through 9 is the moon. Moon has always been associated with the gate to the astral. So it's a very appropriate, it's a very magical planet. So it's a very appropriate grid to use as a default grid. You can always use that 9-column chart as a default. If you add 10 at the end, then you have all the planets plus what you could call the supernals if you were working with Kabbalah. And then you would have all the planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and Earth. Those are numbered 3 through 10 2 and 1 are associated with the source, the ultimate, Kether, whatever, and Hakma, which is the Milky Way, the zodiac of this, the zodiac of the stars in the sky. That's Kabbalah. But as the universe and as the source of light and life, you've got 10 now. All 10 numbers are engaged magically. Using a grid of 1 doesn't make much sense. 2 is hardly an improvement. 3 is a very long, narrow chart, as I just showed you. Now, there are several ways of doing sigils and of using sigils. I have created names for astral beings using the grid of 9 as a basis, where, for example, if I want a sigil for, see if I've got the 6s. If I wanted a grid that explained or made a word for the sun, I would try to make an S shape of letters that I chose. Oh, come on now, Gretchen. That's not going to make much sense without showing them how it's done. Okay, I'll have to look for that later. Going on the grids. All right, here we go. These are bigger. Okay, let's just go with 4. I want to come up with something that is Jupiter. If I want it for just Jupiter, I can make a J on the grid where I start with A, go across to D, then come back to C and go straight down to W and across to U. I could go up to M if I wanted to, but that would be A, D, C, W, U. You see, I've just spelled out something, presumably a name or a word, and I can then use that J as a sigil that represents Jupiter, and I have the word that it spells out. Why do I do that? Well, if you want to establish the Jupiterian energy in the room, you can create that grid. You now have a word that, if you choose the letters carefully, like A, D, L, I. A, D, L, I, that makes a J, and that it as an overall shape. Now you have Adley. You see, you can pronounce that. So now instead of using the word Jupiter, you can use the word Adley. Why would you do that? Well, if you want to invoke an energy, you can call it the Adley energy. And what it does is it allows you to disassociate your conscious mind from the meaning that you have given to that sequence of words of that symbol. That J, shaped just like that, becomes like a logo for Jupiter that allows you to dismiss the conscious thought about what you're doing and allow it to become a subconscious background sound that adds to your ritual. I've used this method to establish a name for each of the planets, all 8 of them, and these are the guardians that I use, the astral guardians. So if I take Earth and I call it Tellus, which is one of the alternative names for Earth, T-E-L-U-S or T-E-L-L-U-S, I never remember, and I make a T shape on my Earth grid, I spell out the word D-Y, D-E-W-E-I. And that gives me the name D-Y. And I associate D-Y with the Aziza of West Africa. That is the hairy man of the forest. They're tricksters, and they give you good magic, good medicine, good medicinal plants from the jungle. And they appear to be chimpanzees. And you can imagine how much fun it is to work with DY because he's got an incredibly chimpanzee sense of humor. Gets to be fun. Now I have 8 guardians, one for each planet. The first one that I discovered was called Sevez, Sevez, and he's Mars. And if you can think of a kabuki dancer in white robes with big, huge red dots, and he's dancing around, and he's a samurai kabuki dancer, and he's just stomping around with his samurai sword hanging out, being all kinds of crazy, because Mars is not only the warrior, but he's also the blacksmith, and he's got a sense of humor. Oh my word, when he showed up, he was stomping around in my brain. I was very glad to get a picture of him because then I could stop hearing him in my head. I don't hear very many things in my head, but he just kind of hung out until I got him on paper. The purpose of this is to know that on the astral, I've got critters out there that can help me. They're from 7 different continents with 7 different cultural associations, and they serve 7 different planets. Well, actually 8. And the result is that I can depend on them, and they're going to be there. Okay. But I'm not going to create something like that and then just let them run wild. They report to a higher being that is more like a bodhisattva in a lot of ways. And it is one of the adepts. The concept is like a bodhisattva who has come up through many lives and has attained a state of pure association with the planet. The construction is the same for the name, but the letter of the planet is traced out on the planetary grid. On the planetary grid. Okay, so they all get to be different sizes and shapes. Now, the bodhisattvas, the adepts, don't have any personality. They are the equivalent of Briatic forces. They're equivalent to archangels. They are similar to pagan gods. They are pure thought. They don't get involved in other planetary energies other than their own. And they're in charge of the guardians. So they keep them in check. So I don't have to go out on the astral and beat up on my chimpanzee friend. Their names are constructed in the same way. And one of the rules of making the names is that when you take the values of those letters that I trace out, they have to add up either to the planetary number or a multiple of the planetary number, and they have to be pronounceable. Since I'm making these names up, I get to do it with rules that make my life easier. Okay, now the third level that I would be interested in is some sort of name of a deity. I am very much, I don't know, pantheist. There are different names for other than monotheist and polytheist. I kind of sort of figure that all gods may not be one god, but there sure are a whole lot more than we know names for. So what I'm looking at as the third level of critters is a god force or a letter force, a force behind the zodiac sign, behind the element, behind the planet. At that point, I use a different method for constructing the name. This is a side note because it completes the set. In this case, I take the letters that are associated with that tell me something about the critter that I'm naming. So I will start with, for example, on a planet, the letter that represents that planet. Z is the letter assigned to Saturn. So the name starts with Z. Saturn is a water planet, so I is the letter for water. It rules Aquarius, which is P, and R, which is Capricorn. ZIPR And then at the end, I add A, which is the elemental spirit, and H, which is the universe. AH. In Hebrew, they add EL, which means son of, or of God, or of fire, whatever it is. But AH is added to designate this as a deific type force. So ZIPRAH, Zipra. Again, it has to be pronounceable. Sometimes the signs have to reverse in order to get it more pronounceable. But that is another method of constructing a name, just to let you know that it's a complete set. With the numbers, we also are able to count out the value of a word. So, for example, if we take health and we trace it off on one of the planetary grids, those letters are each in one of the columns. I take the number at the top of the column for each of the letters, I add those numbers together, and I end up with a number that represents that word. Typical of all numeration, whether it's in Hebrew, Greek, or English, that total is part of the representation of that particular word. The number changes depending on the planet, because it's being traced out on a different grid. So if I had a word that was ABCD, it would be 1 + 2 + 3 + 4. And that totals 10. So ABCD has a numeric value of 10. Okay. Now, this can be done with any word. And any difference in the spelling is going to show up in the value of the word. So, for example, if you have magic, magic is also expressed either with or without a K at the end. And the value of the word comes out differently. This is how the names of those adepts were developed. You can see that they are different. The letters are approximate. That's not very good. And I apologize. I thought I was going to use my cell phone to give you the images, but that setup isn't working right. But the letters are rather liberally shaped in order to get the numbers and the pronunciation and so on. This is the kind of wordplay, number play, that is done by ceremonial magicians all the time. And if you're a Qabalist, for example, there is always a way to get the numbers to come out to a value that you want them to be. And if you can't get the numbers to work, then you just haven't tried hard enough. There is a lot of variation that goes into doing the numeration. How would you use this information? I've thrown a lot of different techniques at you, a lot of different information at you. You apply it by coming up with the number. Once again, we're talking about taking the conscious mind, focusing it so much on the preparation that when you get to the ritual work, the conscious mind is no longer part of the formula. It goes away because now you have it sufficiently symbolized that you have stepped away from the trigger word, the word that states your purpose, the indication of how you're going to work your magic. You've stepped away from that and yet kept the value, the depth of meaning encoded in a way that you are able to decipher it. It has meaning. You've worked out the meaning. You have figured out details about it. You've spent time concentrating your attention on that design, coming up with that set of numbers and that set of meanings. Now, the numbers can also be used in a much more informal method. For example, if I want to do a ritual that focuses on business, on the organization of a business, on my job, on the rulership, on hierarchies of people, then I would use Jupiter. Now, I've already mentioned Jupiter is the value of 4. That means that I might have 4 candles on my altar. I might say the keywords of whatever spell I'm working on 4 times. I might have the color blue on the altar because blue is the color of Jupiter. In the same way, I would incorporate 4 into the working. I might take 4 days to prepare for it if it's a very big working that I want to have a lot of energy invested into. I might say key phrases 4 times. I might sing 4 bars of a song that's Jupiterian. I might recite a 4-line poem. I would incorporate the number 4 as many ways as I could into the overall setup of what I'm doing with my ritual. That gets to be a lot of fun when you go to the moon, whose number is 9. The candle magic book that I learned from first, called Candle Magic. It's either Cunningham or I think it was Cunningham. I might be wrong on the author, but there's a ritual in there to augment your magical power. And you do it for 9 days consecutively. And each day you add lighting 1 more candle. First night you light 1 candle. Second day you light 2 candles, and so on until you have completed the 9 days. Not only do you have 9 candles, but you walk around. You use a central secondary altar. You walk around that altar once the first night, twice the second night. By the 9th night, you're walking 9 times around your altar that has 9 lit candles on it. Presumably they're purple or violet, and marching around there 9 times. Let me tell you something. That creates a vortex. That is a very powerful ritual. And it's kind of fun because it does weird things to your subconscious. It just really triggers all kinds of happy magic stuff in your brain. But the numbers become one more layer that you can plaster over all of your magic work for that spell, that ritual, that sequence of rituals, that approach to things. Okay, so we have the 8 planets. Traditionally, there are 7 planets. Okay, 7 planets. Now, 21st century, we know Earth is a planet. So it's a different kind of planet than the others, because the others are called planets because the word means sky wanderer. Well, we wander the sky. It's just that we don't see it wandering the sky. So it's 9 plus, it's not 9. It's 7 plus 1. Planet Earth gets added into the set, but only sometimes. Other times, it's only just the 7. So it's a variable presence in any planetary system. Now, Earth also shows up as an element. So you have planet Earth and element Earth. They are very close, but not the same. It turns out that I have assigned Q to planet Earth and U to element Earth, and the 2 work together, QU, because the 2 letters are dependent on each other. The playing with numbers is something that some people are really drawn to, and they dig in tooth and nail and just make all kinds of inferences. The book 777 is by Crowley, and in it he has taken the Hebrew alphabet and words that are in Hebrew, and he has spelled out and figured out their numeric value, and then he listed them. So you can go in numerically and find words associated with each number that he has worked out. And it's a rather thick book, and the numbers go way high up. One of my favorites is the number 777, which is the name of the book, and it's a very involved Hebrew phrase. It's not a single word, but he's taken every word and figured out. And then you see what you do is you go to the book and you find words, you get the number of a word, and then you go and take that number and find other words that are associated with the same number. Now those two words are assumed to have a relationship to each other. You can do that with American English words on the charts that I've shown you. You're going to get different values depending on which planet you're doing it in. So you're going to get 26 or 20 or 15 or 30. Different numbers can come up as totals for the same word, depending on which planet you're looking at. It sounds complicated, but if you work with a pencil and paper, it's easy because you write it down. Now you go do the next formulation and you write it down, and then you can compare them. Okay. Are there any questions up to this point?
Yeah, I want to know what the difference in value is between magic and magic with a K.
Okay. Now that I have on a chart that I have to just pull up, because then I don't have to do the arithmetic while we're sitting here. Oh, hell's bells. Where did you go to? Those are all the grids. Okay. So the word magic with MAGIC has a value of 9 in Saturn, Jupiter, and Sun. It has 13 in Mars, 19 in Venus, 17 in Mercury, 24 in the Moon, and 23 in planet Earth. Let's take Saturn. Magic with no K is a value of 9. If you add the K, it becomes 11 in Saturn. If 9 also was 9, Jupiter was all in Jupiter, magic with just the C is 9. If you add the K, it becomes 12. If you go to Venus, the value is 19 for magic without the K and 23 for magic with the K. Okay.
Can you remind me how you know whether it's in Venus or Jupiter or Saturn?
I put it on a different one of the grids.
Oh, okay.
So I put it on the planetary grid that I want to know the value for.
But it's always 9 in
Saturn and Jupiter. Right. Okay. Hang on. Gotcha. Okay. Jupiter. M is a 1. A is a 1. G is a 3. I is a 1. C is a 3. Okay. Do you follow that numeration? Okay. Now you take that same value and you add the K, and you're adding an extra 3. Okay.
So it's now 12.
Okay. Now if I go to the Saturn, M happens to also be 1 here. A, 1. G1, I3, C3.
9,
And so when I add the K, I'm adding 2 extra.
11. Okay.
All right. Now, is that making sense? Because otherwise I'll go back over some of it.
Okay, now I'm just wondering now, how do you know whether it's in Saturn or Jupiter?
Okay. If I'm doing a work of magic that is Saturnian in nature, I want to have my everything lined up in a Saturnian value. If I did a Jupiterian value, then I would be out of sync with the rest of the Saturnian things that I'm trying to do. And the other way around too. Okay. So when I was talking about doing a Jupiter working where I have 4 candles and a blue altar cloth, and I'm walking around my altar 4 times and doing all these 4s, I want to make sure that what I'm working with is the Jupiter numeration and the Jupiter sigils as opposed to the Saturn, because Saturn is going to work sideways, not against, but sideways to all the Jupiter work that I'm doing.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Now, Griffin has a question.
Okay.
Unmute, Griffin.
Wrong button. When you mentioned Tellus earlier,
Yeah.
it inspired me to go off on a 2-minute research rant because I had heard Tellus and Terra bounced around for a long time. So I went and dug up. It was really quite interesting. I thought it might be worth interjecting here that both words actually date to the Greeks and Romans. Terra is the planet. Tellus is the guardian spirit of the planet. And this is also true for the element. Terra is the earth. Tellus is the guardian spirit of the element. So I thought I could go around instead of being a mere Terran, I could now be a Tellurian, but I guess not.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
According to Edward Elmer Doc Smith, PhD, you still qualify. He was my introduction into science fiction, and he did use Tellus and Tellurian.
And yeah, and I forget that the big chunky guy that kept referring to Kinnison as little Tellurian wart.
Yes.
Okay. So there are a couple of other names as well that are sometimes used. Orenda is sometimes used for the energy of planet Earth. And of course, Gaia, which we hear about all the time. Any of these names can be used. You can derive their values and their associations and their sigils anytime you want. Okay. One of the other things that all of this naming stuff can be used for, and this is theoretical. I will tell you that what I'm about to talk about is completely 100% theoretical. I have not tested it personally for the simple reason that I do not do this kind of work with spirits. But in theory, the method of constructing names using the meanings of the letters that I described briefly can be done to create a specific being through its name or title. So you can specify an Aquarian being that is has a secondary force of Pisces, and it's got these planets associated, and you get those letters, you assemble them into a name, and then you can, in theory, invoke that being and and know ahead of time what kind of nature that being is going to have. However, the downfall is that in all of the angelology, demonology, and so on, the lists of names are the names of beings who've already been contacted and are familiar with the process of dialoguing with humans. The names I'm suggesting can be made would create beings that are probably going to say, huh? What was that? Because they have not been called on previously because you just invented their name. So even if that theory is correct, you've got a lot of work to do before you make any useful contact. I only say this because it's a theory that is associated with the letter and number values that we're talking about here. I cannot vouch for anything. I don't work with these techniques in any system. So I don't know if that is a reality that can be explored, but it is something that somebody that's inclined toward working with spirits might be inclined to use this information for.
It sounds like a Rosicrucian version of the Philip experiment.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the Philip experiment.
The Philip experiment was something that I believe was done in the 70s. It was an attempt to create a synthetic spirit,
Okay.
a completely fictitious spirit.
Yeah.
It's his own backstory and everything. And to invoke and basically involve that spirit in seance type settings and see if the experimenters could get all of the same kind of seance like activities from a completely fictitious synthesized spirit. It was successful, actually, quite successful.
I'm not surprised.
No, I'm not either. It's given what I have discovered in my own early student days and practice since then, in order to create a composite spirit, all you need is a sufficiently consistent model and energy from enough people. You feed it in there, it will work.
Yeah. Okay, so my understanding is, okay, let's go back to what I was discussing about the guardians, the astral guardians. They exist. I've worked with them in ritual, and it makes for a very interesting ritual. I've also worked with them in a novel form and explored their nature that way too. They are most closely related to the tulpas of Tibet. A tulpa is a somewhat less exotic, believe it or not, form of a golem. They're in the same kind of category of an artificial critter. I call them all critters with high respect, but they're all critters because then I don't have to specify what their actual nature is. They're not human. They're not living human beings. They're something else. Okay, so
would that be anything like the Alaskan Tupilak?
I don't know, but quite possibly. An artificial, non-physical being that is locatable in the astral or the creative or the archetypal. Those are the three worlds beyond the physical because they don't have a body. So anything from ghosts up to gods and then some could be included in this. Okay.
You said golem, which implies a created physical vessel.
That's what I'm describing. Okay, now in a golem, you've got a physical vessel because that's what the magician is using, but he's created entirely with energy. And let me tell you, that's not an easy process.
No, I can imagine not.
I've done some work that happens to overlap with the early stages of doing that work. Yeah. It does interesting things to your lifestyle. The guardians are developed as a concept, a personality that is astral associated with a planet. It's only going to react within the nature of that planet because that's the way they're defined. I put together symbols of what they were intended to be like what their traits were, what their powers were. I put those on paper as different symbols and images. I put everything associated with them together. And then because I may do crazy things, but I'm no damn fool. I decided that I did not want to be the source of energy for their life energy. Yeah, we're not going to have 8 critters feeding off my body's energy. So what
I've
did,
had somebody attempt to feed off of me. I found a solution.
you could go on a diet.
No. Basically plug into the void and just open the channels.
Oops.
It's about like flexing your bicep when you've got a mosquito attached.
So I got big crystals.
Uh-huh.
And I was very, very careful in choosing them.
Mhm.
Not for their intrinsic quality, but for their overall size and power. Because I wasn't about to give a strong one to one and a weak one to another and have sibling rivalry going on.
No, that just creates dinner table fights, and that's not good for everybody.
Exactly. So I put all of that together, and then I did a ritual in which I virtually baptized them, brought them to life specifically at a particular time and date. And I created a shrine for each of them, a box that had glass sides to it. And I keep those as a set together in my temple. They are self-energizing because it's quartz. The energy is not drawn off me. They know what their job is. Oh, yeah. And then I gave them parents, those adepts, those bodhisattva level beings to control them. Because I'm also not going to set them out to go amok. So there is a rulership of them. I may be a fool for having done this, but it seemed like the logical thing to do at the time. It worked very well. That was years and years ago, probably 20 years ago, and they're still out there behaving themselves for the most part. So life is good. I don't know what's going to happen when I die, but I got another 20, 25 years to worry about that.
Actually, you just reminded me that there's somebody that I need to recover contact with, and a variation on that may actually be a good way to do it.
The story that is told by Neil Thurston about when she was a nun studying Buddhism in Tibet, she wanted somebody to study with.
She was the author of Tell My Horse, was she not?
This is the other one. It may be the same.
Zora Neale Hurston?
I think, I'm not sure. I think it may have been. She became a full-fledged, fully trained nun in Tibet.
Okay.
What I'm talking about. And she, to have a study partner, she created a tulpa, which was great at first because it gave her somebody to interact back and forth with, because that gave her a better learning environment for her method of learning. And then she began to forget about it, and she began to not interact with it. And it went amok.
Well, you know, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, exactly, because she had no control on it. It just went floating off, and the control on it began to dissipate. So now it's an organized energy form that doesn't have any form of solidity to its organization, and it caused all kinds of trouble. So she had to go out and do some special work to dispense it, to get rid of it, to dissipate it. So you have to take responsibility for where this program ends as well as where it begins. But you also have to be very careful that you're doing it correctly and for the right reasons, the right motivations, and for good cause, because it's not something that you should just do on a whim. Somebody asked me if they could make a set of guardians and attach them to my guardians so that they'd work in his temple too. And I said, no. And no. And I'm not a fool. No. I think he resented it. I said, listen, if you really want to do that, you go out and do the study work, figure out the issues, and you make your own. You can use this method. I don't care if you use my method, but you're not attaching them to what I've created. No, because you're trying to create a secondary life form. No. No. So there should be a way that anyone that's associated with the work I do, that finds out about these creatures and their names and their realm of involvement, can ask them for help and they will be aided. Because I don't keep them overly busy. So these guardians have plenty of time to help anybody who needs their help relative to their planet. But they don't need to create another being for it.
Do you mention these in one of your books?
Several of my books.
Okay, so which books would those be in?
The numerology and the color is located in this book with images, black and white images of the guardians with their full names, because, you know, you might as well have the whole kit and caboodle. I'm not going to give you a part of it and make you go looking for it. I don't know if you can see these or not. They are black and white images of the critters.
We can't read them, but we can see they're there.
See that there are images there. Okay.
So buy the book, and you can see.
Buy the book, and you'll notice it's not a skinny book.
I haven't gotten that far in mine.
It's over 280 pages.
Navigating
the Abcedrian System.
Okay.
Abcedrian System. Okay. As long as we're looking at spellings of things, look at the spelling of Abcedrian. A-B-C-E-D. Get it?
Yes, I got it right away, actually.
Other people use the word Abcedrian or
they're the same people that pronounce aluminium. I don't talk to such people.
I always said Abcedrian.
That's fine. All of the above work. Basically, the name tells you it's not Kabbalah, it's not Isophia. Apologies for the word. It's not witchcraft. It is a different system. It is not Golden Dawn, but it learns from everybody. I have learned from the OTO. I've learned from the Wiccans. I've learned from Golden Dawn. I've learned from Aurum Solus. And so a lot of commonalities that go underneath all of them are found in that book. The chapter on time will give you this is the workbook. There's a textbook that is a shaved down version of this for people who don't need to go through the exercises. They just need the basic information. And it's called the Abcedrian System without the navigating part. It has a chapter on color theory that takes the artist's color wheel and combines it with the zodiac. And it's absolutely astounding how much information color theory from the artists will give you about astrology and the elements that we use and the planets and the zodiac. There's a perfect match. And it's the artist's color wheel. It is not the lighting spectrum. The difference between those two is that the lighting spectrum goes basically red, yellow, green, blue, violet. Okay. The color wheel, when you get the red and the violet, it closes with red, violet.
I'm a graphic artist. I'm very well familiar with the color wheel.
And if you go out on Google to look for color theory, you're going to get all the stuff about wavelengths and the spectrum, which is great if that's what you're working with. But I'm not working with light that I'm projecting. I'm talking about colors that I can reach into my paint box, pull out and paint with.
Pigment. Yeah.
It's reflected light as opposed to projected light.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take a sidestep and you're in the light, the light projection anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So we slice down through all of those incredibly boring names of colors that you get in the Golden Dawn. Okay, here is a color, the name of which will perfectly identify what you should visualize for using this color in your magical work. A natrious vortex of scintillating colors. You got that color firmly in your mind now?
Actually, yes.
It is not an easy color to come up with an idea of.
No,
if
no,
I-
it's a bit like the descriptions of what is termed brilliance.
Yes. So instead, I slim that all down to the planetary, okay, if you want the Golden Dawn terminology, it's the Briatic Queen scale, because that's where you get red for Mars and green for Venus, and not some hunky-dory color, which is a
Put them
nickname.
together and it's Christmas.
Yeah, there you go. And instead, what the hang on a second. The brain just went out the other side of the room. I am sorry. That's called a senior moment. What was I talking about?
Brain fart has fewer syllables.
Yeah.
We're talking about spectrum and
Right.
colors and
Oh, right.
gods.
Okay. All right. So instead of using exotic names for colors that attempt to describe things that are better seen than imagined, what I use is the cleanest color I can come up with: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Red, red, orange, orange, yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, blue, violet, violet, red, red. Okay. What I do instead to designate the difference is that if I am creating an atmosphere, I think of the opaque color infusing the air like a fog.
Okay.
Now I reach out to the universe and I make some sort of contact with the ray that I am working with. Let's say Mars. I'm reaching out with red that I have created, and I am sending that red opaqueness out into the universe. And when I finally touch something, it converts into a ruby light ray that descends pure red but transparent. So opaque, transparent, like a gem colored coming
And
back.
interpenetrating.
That'll work too. But that simple description, I can take a beginner or an advanced user of magic through an exercise where they project outward. It's like you're saying, this red fog is what I am seeking to touch. This is my aspiration. And then the inspiration comes back in as the clear ruby ray or the clear gem-like ray. Now we've sidestepped from numbers over to colors. Both the numbers and the colors are used magically in the same sort of way. They stand in for, they replace for the purposes of, they symbolize, they represent other forces at different levels of being. So, like I was saying, 4 for Jupiter, 4 times around your altar, 4 altar candles, 4 blue altar candles on a blue altar cloth that has a square of 4 sides as the layout on the altar. 4, 4, 4, 4, blue 4, 4. Do you see? If I'm going to chant something, I chant it 4 times. If I'm going to use a battery, I'm going to use a battery of 4. Everything that I can make part of that planet is going to become. Now, there are books that have given either modern or supposedly Neoplatonic associations of particular notes with each of the planets. But again, disclaimer, I am not a musician. So the theory sits as a little ball of potential information that I offer to anybody that is familiar with magic and with music. Go play, find the reality. I can give you 1 or 2 books to find information in. But personal experience isn't going to cut it. I stopped studying music 15 years before I started studying magic. So
that reminds me of a
Okay.
workshop I went to where they played music, which turned out later to be, I think it's Bertolk's Planet.
Bartok. Yeah.
Bartok's, and he, years ago, and I didn't know what it was, but he basically played it and had each of us listen and say what images come to you and jot those down, and then he collected them all and to see if that music had properly gotten all of us to recognize the right planetary influences. It's a cool workshop.
Yeah.
But I hate to say it, but we've used up an hour. So
Okay,
you got any,
I'd like to
I'm not going to
sneak this
turn you
in.
off until you have had a
Holst.
chance to.
Holst. It was by Holst, the planets.
Gustav,
right,
okay,
okay,
Yes.
Gustav Holst.
Okay, good.
I'm
Well,
going to
thank you for
sneak
correcting
in
me.
John
But-
Coltrane's tonal pentagram here.
Okay.
Okay.
But I
I'm gonna have
want
to
you,
look
do
that
you
up.
have anything you really need to finish
Nope.
before we say goodnight?
That covered it. Because we spilled
Thank you.
over into other topics.
This is very cool. I would want to remind people to do this, that this was with Gretchen A L Schork, and that I think you're going to be speaking at Changing Times, Changing Worlds. And we are going to, which will be the 3rd through the 5th of November, coming up on April 17th, I think, in Otherworldly. We have Olya Orlaska coming to talk about Russian fairy tales, which is going to be cool. And so I'm going to
You mean
call
the dead one next week or week after?
No, I thought you said April. I thought you said you
Yes, yes,
you weren't
because
available till April.
first coronation, and I have a lot of projects to be done before
Yeah,
the 7th.
So
After
it gives
7th,
us something to look forward to. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we're gonna do fairy tales, and later in the year, we're gonna do a deep dive on the Rusalki. Everybody loves the Rusalki.
everybody likes the Rusalki, except the people who have them in their back pond.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's such a
Yes.
funny meme.
I swear to God, if your house shits in my yard one more time.
What time?
Anyway,
Yep, that one.
so yes, let's
It
see
is
now.
Tumblr that can produce such gems.
Yeah. Okay, so thank everybody, and
Thank you.
don't have to. I'm going to turn it off now, and